Activate the signal, Rinsolis commanded, his voice steady, as he watched the countdown clock flash on the display. The words were simple, but the weight of them crushed the air in the room. Jalek Vorin, standing across from him, pressed his hands to the console, fingers hovering above the final command, waiting for Solis's permission. "This is it," Vorin muttered, his voice low but full of conviction. "We're doing this now," Solis nodded, his gaze unflinching. "No turning back. Do it." With a single motion, Vorin executed the sequence. The signal pulsed outward, unseen and undetected. The Galactic Council, oblivious to the storm brewing at the fringes of their empire, would feel the repercussions soon enough. Earth, long dismissed as irrelevant, was about to make its mark. The ship, the exiled Dawn, silently hovered in the void, cloaked from the prying eyes of the galaxy. Solis's eyes remained fixed on the large heads-up display. Jalek's fingers moved with practiced precision, confirming the calibration of their weapon. The quantum signal disruptor, their crowning achievement, was finally unleashed. A weapon designed not to destroy, but to neutralize, to disable, to stop entire fleets in their tracks with a pulse too precise for anyone to detect before it was too late. "We've waited for this moment." Vorin's voice had an edge to it now, a thrill coursing through him, but Solis barely acknowledged it. The Council wouldn't know what hit them until their fleets lay helpless in the dark. "Ready?" Vorin confirmed, though his tone was almost impatient. "Let it be." Solis didn't flinch. He never did. His mind was already thousands of steps ahead, calculating the next move, even before the signal had completed its journey. On the Xanath Varrock fleet, a mile away in the vastness of space, the signal hit with surgical precision. Like a soft hum, it passed undetected, until it was too late. The First Fleet commander, Vex Terrell, noticed the anomaly only after his ships went still, his sensors once humming with data, now blank. "What the hell?" Vex Terrell barked, looking frantically around his bridge, as his fleet's systems froze. The screen before him was a haze of static, unreadable. Panic spread quickly among his officers. Their most sophisticated weapons, their advanced technology, all rendered in. Not a single system could respond. "They've hacked us," one of the officers gasped, his voice cracking under the weight of realization. But it wasn't hacking. It was far worse. The quantum signal had done its work. Vex Terrell was powerless. "We're sitting ducks," sir." A voice cracked through the static, but Terrell had no time to respond. His fleet was paralyzed, and Earth's next move came without warning. From the darkened silence of space, the exiled Dawn's hidden fleet surged forward, releasing their hypernova projectiles with devastating precision. The first ship disintegrated in a flash of light, turning into nothing more than ash, and the rest followed in a series of deafening bursts of destruction. Each projectile hit its mark, leaving only void where once proud fleets had existed. As the Xanath Varrock's ships were turned to rubble, Solis remained unfazed, his eyes cold and calculating as the destruction unfolded. Vorin, on the other hand, couldn't hide the smirk forming on his face. "They never saw it coming, did they?" Vorin said, his voice tinged with excitement, but Solis didn't respond. He wasn't celebrating, he wasn't even relieved, he only felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing the next phase was in motion. The quantum signal disruptor had hit its target with near-perfect accuracy, neutralizing the Xanath Varrock fleet in one fell swoop. The first part of Earth's plan had gone off without a hitch, but the war had only just begun. A heavy silence hung between Solis and Vorin, as they stared at the feeds, watching the debris of the First Fleet float into nothingness. "That's Phase 1, Solis murmured under his breath. "Now we go to Phase 2, Vorin grinned, his fingers already moving to the next sequence. The exiled Dawn moved with ghostly precision, its engines silently powering it deeper into enemy territory. No alarms blared. No one suspected anything until it was too late. The Galactic Council was still celebrating peace talks, assuming that Earth was a distant relic, too weak to matter. In their hubris, they had ignored the growing threat beneath their noses. "Keep moving, Vorin," Solis commanded, his eyes never leaving the screen. He wasn't looking for praise or acknowledgement. Solis didn't need the rush of victory. He needed control, and they were on the cusp of it. "We're a step ahead, Rain. They can't catch us now," Vorin muttered, but there was no answer from Solis. He knew better. Earth had only one chance to act, and this was it. The Galactic Council would never suspect the scale of humanity's power until it was too late. For 10 years Earth had been watching from the sidelines, but in this moment, the signal was more than a technological achievement. It was a statement, a declaration. The Galactic Council was about to face something they could not even comprehend. And it wasn't just about power. It was about the quiet rise of humanity, no longer the weak, forgotten species, but the force that would rewrite the galaxy's future. Ray and Solace didn't feel the rush of triumph. Not yet. The Galactic Council would retaliate. They had to, but Earth was ready. The battle was not yet over, and it wouldn't be won with a single victory. It was won in the cold, calculated movements of those who had waited and planned. The signal had gone out. The Galactic Council's pride was already shattered, their fleets reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. But there was more to come. "Activate the second sequence," Ryan Solace said, his tone even, almost detached, as his fingers hovered over the console. The cold glow of the laser plasma displays reflected off his sharp features, casting an eerie light across the dim room. His mind didn't linger on the action. It was automatic now, the culmination of years of planning and quiet sacrifice. Jellic Vorin, standing a few paces away, leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table, as if bracing for something that had yet to happen. His eyes never left the screen. "We're on the edge now, Ryan. You can feel it, can't you?" Solace didn't look up. His thoughts, like his actions, were methodical. The weight of his wife's absence still pressed on him, but there was no room for sentiment now. The quantum signal was Earth's last resort, and his obsession with its success had become the singular focus of his existence. A hum in the distance, the low drone of the ship's life support systems, was the only sound in the room. "The countdown is proceeding," he replied, his voice unwavering. The plan had been set into motion. Now it was time to execute, piece by piece. The exiled Dawn hung in the shadow of a forgotten nebula, hidden from the sensors of the Galactic Council. In the control room, the steady blinking of lights marked the calm before the storm. Earth had waited too long to be heard, and now the signal would make its presence known. Vorin ran his fingers through his graying hair, his face lit by the soft, flickering light of the heads-up display. The man's gaze was unwavering, filled with excitement and the thrill of battle that was just around the corner. He turned to Solace, a quiet grin pulling at his lips. "I've fought on the front lines before, but nothing like this. Are you sure you're not getting a little eager, Ryan?" Solace glanced at him then, the cold edge of his eyes cutting through the room like a blade. "This is not the time for eagerness. It's about precision." In the outer sectors of the galaxy, the Galactic Council's fleets continued to patrol, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering just beyond their reach. Peace talks were being held, and new trade routes were being discussed. The Council didn't know that their complacency would soon cost them everything. Ryan's hand hovered over the activation button. The system had been tested. The signal would work. It had to work. He thought back to the early days, when his wife had stood beside him, their minds aligned, their goals the same. But now, all that remained was this single action that would either bring about Earth's reckoning, or prove the greatest failure of their lives. The clock ticked. It felt as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the decision to be made. Vorin's foot tapped impatiently on the floor, his mind racing through the potential consequences. He could feel the tension building in the air, the quiet anticipation of what was about to unfold. "Deploy the first sim," Solace said, his voice cutting through the heavy stillness. In the blink of an eye, the quantum signal was unleashed. The energy surged from the exiled Dawn, traveling through the vast reaches of space, invisible to any watchful eye. In the Xanath Varrock fleet, the first signs of disturbance began to show, subtle flickers in their communication channels, a brief moment of static. Then, everything froze. The Xanath Varrock commanders looked at their consoles in confusion, unable to comprehend the abrupt shutdown of their system. Their ships stood still, adrift in space, vulnerable and defenseless. On the exiled Dawn, Vorin looked at Solace, his expression sharpening with recognition. "It's working. The fleet is paralyzed." Solace didn't react. The first step had been executed flawlessly, but the mission was far from over. The signal had neutralized the first fleet, but Earth's ultimate victory would be secured only when the rest of the galaxy understood that Earth could strike without warning, without hesitation. "Now, we finish it," Solace murmured, turning his focus to the next phase of their plan. His fingers danced over the controls again, initiating the next sequence of operations. The signal had been the first strike, covert, silent, official. But the next phase would come with the force of Earth's hidden might. The hypernova projectiles would tear through the enemy fleet, ensuring that there would be no question of Earth's power. Ready for deployment, Vorin confirmed, as his hands moved across the console. The fleet was in position. The Xanath Varrock fleet, once the pride of the Galactic Council, now drifted motionless. Not a single ship could respond. The hypernova projectiles were released. The first alien vessel erupted in a blaze of light, its remains vaporized in a fraction of a second. The next ship followed suit, then the next, and the next. Solace watched the destruction unfold on the laser plasma displays, but his eyes didn't linger on the explosion. The show of force, the violence of it, did nothing to quell the gnawing emptiness inside him. He knew the Galactic Council would retaliate, but the point had been made. Earth was no longer a forgotten world. Humanity had found its place at the table of power. The first fleet is neutralized, Vorin remarked, his voice laced with satisfaction. This is only the beginning, Solace replied. Prepare for the second phase. They won't stay idle for long. Back on the Xanath Varrock flagship, the captain of the fleet stood frozen before his screen. He had felt the moment his fleet had been struck. The systems failed. The ships, once a proud display of military might, were nothing more than drifting debris. Vex Terrell watched in horror, as his once pristine vessels collapsed in on themselves, destroyed by an unseen force. What happened? What happened to our system? Terrell shouted, his voice barely a whisper beneath the weight of realization. His crew scrambled, but their efforts were futile. The enemy, hidden in plain sight, had brought their downfall. Back in the war room, Solace stood at the console, his eyes never leaving the chaotic visuals of the destruction playing out before him. His hands trembled ever so slightly as he prepared for the next wave. The reality of Earth's rise was unfolding, and every action was another calculated step toward claiming their place among the stars. Phase 2, Solace said, his voice steady. He had no time to celebrate. There was still much to be done. The Galactic Council was about to learn that Earth was no longer a fringe planet. They were now a force to be reckoned with. Deploy Phase 2. Solace's words rang out with cold certainty. The first fleet was gone. The second would follow. The exiled Dawn glided silently through space, its mission far from complete. Solace and Vorin had only just begun their work. What had been set into motion could not be stopped, and the Galactic Council's fate was sealed. Phase 2's beginning, Vorin said, the excitement in his voice barely contained. Target locked. Preparing for deployment. The words echoed across the control room, as Ryan Solis's fingers moved over the console, tapping in the final sequence. The quantum signal disruptor had already begun its journey, traveling through the dark void of space, undetected by the Xanath Varrock fleet. The countdown to Earth's first strike had begun. It's time, Solis muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the laser plasma displays in front of him. There was no fanfare, no feeling of triumph, only the cold reality of what was about to unfold. The plan was already in motion, and Earth's first blow was poised to hit. Dralik Vorin, standing by the side, watched as Solis prepared the final deployment. His fingers twitched with impatience, but there was a flicker of excitement in his eyes. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the culmination of years of preparation. You know, I thought it would feel different, Vorin said, his voice low but filled with anticipation. It's like the calm before the storm, isn't it? Solis didn't look at him, his focus never wavering from the task at hand. We don't have time for feeling. His voice was sharp, almost cold. The moment has arrived. Let's finish this. The quantum signal reached the Xanath Varrock fleet in an instant, bypassing their advanced defensive systems with unnerving ease. The fleet's once reliable network went dark. No alarms, no warnings, just a sudden, incomprehensible paralysis. On the bridge of the Xanath Varrock flagship, Commander Vex Terrell stared at his console in disbelief. Report. What's happening? His voice was strained as his officers scrambled to understand what was occurring. The fleet's systems were simply shutting down, as if something far more advanced than their technology had taken hold. We're offline. Everything is frozen. Our systems are completely down. One of his officers stammered, panic creeping into his voice. Terrell's eyes widened in horror, unable to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. Their greatest strength, their technological superiority, was being ripped away by an unseen hand, and they were helpless to stop it. In the control room of the exiled Dawn, Solis observed the destruction unfolding on the screens before him. The Xanath Varrock fleet, once considered the pinnacle of military power, was now frozen in place, entirely at Earth's mercy. There was no sound, no explosion to mark the moment of their defeat, just the systematic collapse of their advanced systems, followed by the sudden, brutal attack. "Deploy the projectiles," Solus ordered, his voice unwavering. The hypernova projectiles, their ultimate weapon, shot from Earth's hidden fleet, leaving a trail of light in their wake. In mere moments, the first ship in the Zenith Varrock fleet was disintegrated, its structure torn apart by the devastating force of the projectile. The fleet was caught off guard. Ships that had once commanded the galaxy's respect were now reduced to nothing more than floating debris, each explosion more destructive than the last. The hypernova projectiles struck with unerring accuracy, obliterating the Zenith Varrock's fleet in a stunningly rapid sequence. The visuals on the laser plasma displays were a blur of fire and destruction. Nothing was left standing. "We did it," Voron said quietly, his eyes fixed on the explosions unfolding on the screen. There was no celebration, no victory dance, just a quiet acknowledgement that the first part of their plan had been executed with perfection. But it wasn't over yet. The Council won't wait long to respond. They'll see this as a challenge. Solus's gaze never left the screen. "This is just the beginning. We've only made the first move. Earth is rising." In the control room aboard the Zenith Varrock flagship, the atmosphere was thick with disbelief. Terrell stood frozen before his screen, watching as his fleet disintegrated. The unthinkable had happened. Their defensive systems had been breached with a precision they could not comprehend. "What is this? Who did this?" Terrell demanded, his voice rising in desperation. The Zenith Varrock had prided themselves on their technological might, yet in the blink of an eye, it had all been torn away. "We've been hacked, but this isn't hacking. It's something worse, something far beyond our capabilities," one of the officers said, eyes wide with fear. The cold reality of their defeat began to sink in. Terrell, unable to comprehend what had just occurred, staggered backward, his mind racing. How had it all happened so fast? How had they been so thoroughly caught off guard? Back on the exiled Dawn, Solus remained calm, observing the aftermath, with the cool detachment of a strategist who had been through far worse. "Phase 1 complete," he muttered to himself. But even as the words left his lips, the dread of what was to come settled over him. Voron was right. This was just the beginning. Earth had struck first, but now the Galactic Council would have no choice but to retaliate. "Prepare for Phase 2, Solus ordered. He had no time for reflection, no time for second thoughts. The battle was far from over, and Earth's future was still uncertain. "We cannot afford to hesitate now. They'll retaliate," Voron said, a grin forming on his lips. "And when they do, we'll be ready." "They have no idea what we're capable of," Solus said, turning away from the screen. His mind was already calculating the next steps, already planning the next strike. "We've only just begun to show them what Earth can do." As the Zenith Varrock fleet was reduced to cosmic dust, the Galactic Council's first response was one of confusion. No alarms had blared, no sign had warned them of the impending attack, and now, the once proud fleets of their finest warriors lay shattered and burned. The Council's military leaders scrambled to understand the devastation, but it was too late. The consequences of their complacency had arrived. Their fleets, once thought invincible, had been wiped out in a matter of seconds. What had been their greatest strength was now their greatest weakness. The Galactic Council had miscalculated, and now Earth had made its statement. "Phase 1 has been executed," Voron said, his voice full of anticipation, as he turned toward Solus. "We've made them see us." The words hung in the air, but Solus didn't respond immediately. He knew the road ahead would be treacherous. The Council wouldn't take this lying down. "Let them come," Solus said, his voice cold. "We're ready." And with that, the first chapter of Earth's rise was complete. The Galactic Council had learned that humanity, once thought weak and forgotten, had returned, and with the return came power that no one could have predicted. "What the hell is happening?" Euros Drell barked, his voice breaking through the tense atmosphere of the Council's war room. He slammed his hand against the laser plasma display, the data blinking erratically as his fleet's once pristine systems failed. There was no sign of what had caused it, just the sudden, inexplicable paralysis that rendered every ship in his fleet useless. The fleet, the pride of the Galactic Council, had been left dead in space, immobilized by an unknown force. "Commander, we can't regain control. The systems are locked out." One of his officers trembled, staring at the blank screen where their navigation systems used to be. Drell's mind raced. The technology they used should have been impenetrable, foolproof. And yet, here they were. The destruction of the First Fleet hadn't been an anomaly. It was a calculated strike, one that shook the very foundation of their military supremacy. "Who's responsible for this?" he demanded, his voice thick with a growing sense of fear. The magnitude of the situation was just starting to sink in. There was no way they could have predicted something like this. Across the galaxy in the exiled Dawn's command center, Ryan Solis and Jalek Vorin observed the chaos unfolding on their screen. Their plan had succeeded. Earth's first strike had been executed flawlessly. The quantum signal disruptor had rendered the Xanath Varrock's fleet motionless, and now Solis was calculating their next move. Vorin watched as the Galactic Council's panic spread across their network. The Xanath Varrock's once powerful ships were now floating derelict, completely useless against Earth's tactical might. His lips curled into a grin. "They don't know what hit them," he said with dark amusement. "No," Solis said, his voice soft but laced with intent. "But they will." He didn't share Vorin's excitement. The first strike was a victory, but it was only the first step. There was still so much to be done. Back at the Galactic Council, Vex Terrell stood frozen in his command room, surrounded by the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. The weight of failure pressed down on him like a physical force. He had led the charge, confident in the superiority of his Xanath Varrock fleet. Now, with nothing but scraps of ships floating in space, that arrogance seemed like a distant memory. "What happened?" he muttered under his breath, unable to fathom the scope of the catastrophe. He quickly keyed in a transmission, but there was no response from his fleet. The only sounds in the room were the sharp beeping of the emergency systems as the last of the fleet's power was drained. The comms crackled, and his officer's voice came through, more frantic now. "Sir, we've tried everything. All systems are locked down. Nothing works. Get me a direct link to the Council," Terrell snapped, his voice tight with frustration. The Council had to understand what was happening, had to realize that their entire strategy had just been crippled by something they couldn't even detect. The transmission came through. Vorin Kresic, one of the Council's senior diplomats, appeared on the screen. His face was a picture of disbelief. "Commander, what is the meaning of this?" "You need to understand," Terrell said, his breath quickening. "We've been attacked. We're completely paralyzed." He looked at the screen, as if he could make them see the chaos in his voice. "We've lost everything." On the other side of the galaxy, Solis turned away from the screen and looked at Vorin. "It's begun," he said. "The Council is waking up. They'll scramble to respond, but it's too late." Vorin let out a breath, his expression cool but filled with a sense of anticipation. "They've been toying with us for too long." His eyes glinted. "Let's see how they react when the game is no longer in their hands." At the Council's meeting chamber, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Vorin Kresic was speaking with the Council's defense leaders, his voice calm but strained. "We need to understand what just happened." The group was in complete disarray. No one could explain why their fleets had collapsed, why their superior technology had been rendered useless in an instant. The Galactic Council's pride, their military technology, was compromised. What did this mean for their standing in the galaxy? "We can't let this stand," Kresic said, attempting to regain some semblance of control. "We must retaliate immediately." Meanwhile, back aboard the exiled Dawn, Solis and Vorin had begun to prepare for the next phase. Their hypernova projectiles had already reduced the Xanath Varrock's fleet to cosmic dust. Earth had struck first, and now they were poised to strike again, with far greater consequences. "Phase 2 is coming," Solis said. There was no time for victory. There was only time for execution. Vorin stepped up beside him, glancing over the next set of targets on the screen. "They'll regroup. You know that." Solis turned, meeting Vorin's gaze. "Let them." His voice was cold, calculated, like the strategist he was. "Their plans are already compromised. They're reacting, not strategizing. That's where we have the advantage." Vorin nodded. "Then let's keep the pressure on them. We can't stop now." As the Galactic Council scrambled to understand the full scale of the attack, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The Xanath Varrock, their most advanced fleet, had been wiped out in mere moments. The Council had spent centuries perfecting their technology, their fleets, but Earth had just shown them the cost of their complacency. "What are we dealing with here?" Kresic demanded from the Defense Command. "We need answers now." No one had answers, though. The quantum signal disruptor had neutralized them without warning, without giving them a chance to react. In the command room, Terrell clenched his fists in frustration. His officers were scrambling to restore some semblance of order. Yet, with every passing moment, the realization grew clearer. Earth had just proven it was more powerful than they had ever imagined. "We've underestimated them," Terrell said, voice low. "We need to regroup. And fast." Back on Earth, Solus and Vorin were already planning the next phase, calculating their moves as the Galactic Council floundered. "Phase 2, Solus murmured again, his gaze hardening. "We're going to show them we're more than just a shadow." Vorin stood behind him, arms crossed, watching the strategy unfold on the laser plasma displays. "We've forced their hand. Let's see how they try to react." The first fleet had fallen. The second phase was about to begin. As the Galactic Council continued to panic and strategize, Earth moved forward with purpose. Every move, every decision was calculated. There was no room for mistakes. The war had begun, and Earth was no longer the underdog. The tension grew thicker with each passing second. The Galactic Council had lost the initiative. The next move would belong to Earth. "Deploy Phase 2. Solus's words were spoken with unflinching resolve. The fate of the galaxy was already in motion, and Earth was the force that would determine. "Phase 2 now." Renning Solus's voice was steady, but the coldness of his words carried the weight of finality. His fingers moved quickly over the heads-up display, the screens illuminating his face with calculated urgency. Behind him the vast expanse of space stretched out, but his eyes never left the data stream. Jalek Vorin, standing at the ready, his arms crossed, didn't hesitate. His fingers were already dancing across the console, confirming the final sequence. They were about to launch the second wave of Earth's retaliation. This time, Earth would show its full hand. On the Xanath fleet, the ghostly remnants of the first attack still hung in the void, derelict ships now nothing more than fragments of their former selves. The Galactic Council hadn't even begun to process the first strike when Earth's next move was already in motion. Their fleets scattered across the galaxy were about to face the unimaginable force of humanity's secret weapon. "You can feel it, can't you?" Vorin murmured, a low, satisfied hum in his voice as he looked over the glowing displays. "They're rattled. They're completely caught off guard." Solus didn't respond at first, his eyes focused on the cascading data, his mind running through a dozen contingencies. The Galactic Council was scrambling, but it was too late. They were already falling behind. Humanity had planned this moment for years, and the pieces were finally falling into place. There was no going back now. "Deploy the gravity field manipulators," Solus ordered, his tone flat, almost impersonal. The manipulators, machines capable of warping space and time, had been humanity's secret weapon from the start. These devices created localized black holes, powerful enough to consume entire fleets. The first phase had been an assault on their systems. The second was total annihilation. With a single keystroke, the signal was sent, the gravity field manipulators, activated, each one positioned to send a massive gravitational pull toward the enemy fleets. The Galactic Council's most elite forces, the Xanath, the Ulshari defenders, and others, were already scattered and weakened from the first strike. But even they had no chance as Earth's weapons began to pull the very fabric of space around them, distorting reality. On the Xanath flagship, Vex Terrell was still recovering from the initial shock when the gravity field manipulator went into action. "What is this? What's happening?" Terrell gasped, gripping the armrests of his command chair as his fleet began to move uncontrollably toward the epicenter of the gravitational collapse. His once proud fleet was now caught in a cosmic trap, every ship being pulled into the center of a growing black hole. The Xanath ships began to distort, twisting and warping as they were consumed by the void. It's the humans," one of his officers stammered, the reality of their defeat setting in. Terrell couldn't find words. He had seen many battles, but nothing like this. This wasn't an enemy fleet. It was a force of nature, moving with ruthless efficiency. The screen flickered as one by one, the Xanath ships were swallowed whole, their remnants reduced to nothing but the particles of their former glory. What had once been the might of the Galactic Council was now a collapsing graveyard in the void of space. "It's too late," Solus whispered to himself as he watched the fleets disappear. The hypernova projectiles had decimated the first wave. Now the gravity field manipulators would erase the rest. Humanity's rise was undeniable, its superiority now a harsh reality for the Galactic Council. "They'll know now." Vorin glanced over at Solus, his expression unreadable. "Not yet." His voice was steady, but there was something darker in it. The battle had been won, but Solus understood. This was not the end. It was only the beginning of a greater shift in power. There would be more to come. and the Galactic Council would be forced to acknowledge the true power of. On the Galactic Council flagship, the silence was deafening. Vorin Kresik, the Council's chief diplomat, stared at the screen in disbelief. He had seen much, dealt with many crises, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer magnitude of what had just occurred. Their once mighty fleets, swallowed by gravity itself, were gone, leaving nothing behind but scattered fragments. "We've been blindsided," Kresik muttered, the shock of the situation still paralyzing his mind. The Galactic Council had prided itself on its technological supremacy, but now that belief lay in tatters. "What are we dealing with here?" "We're dealing with something far beyond us," said Urostrel, the veteran commander. His voice was low, filled with something between fury and fear. "They've weaponized gravity. We've never faced anything like this." He slammed his fist on the console, the realization of their helplessness settling in. The Galactic Council's leaders scrambled, throwing out ideas, making calls, but it was all too late. The Xanath Vrok had been destroyed, and the rest of the fleet was now floating in the gravitational pull of Earth's newest weapon. What little hope they had left was being sucked into a void, both literal and figurative. Back on Earth, Solace and Vorin watched the aftermath unfold across the display. The remnants of the Xanath Vrok fleet were now nothing more than scattered debris, swallowed by the black hole's relentless pull. The laser plasma displays were a blur of light and movement, as Earth's victory continued to reverberate across the galaxy. "We've broken them," Vorin said, a hint of satisfaction creeping into his voice. "They can't possibly recover from this." Solace didn't share his enthusiasm. His focus remained steady, calculating. "This is just the first step." He turned away from the display, his mind already moving forward. "There's still much to do." Vorin raised an eyebrow. "The Council will try to regroup. You know that, right?" Solace nodded slowly. "I expect as much." The Galactic Council was a behemoth, but they were now a wounded one. Earth had shown them the power it wielded, and the message was clear. Humanity was no longer a peripheral player. They were the ones calling the shots now. "Prepare for Phase 3, Solace ordered. His voice clicked. "We keep pushing." The Galactic Council had underestimated Earth. Now they would be forced to reckon with the consequences. The Xanath Vrok, a once feared force, was gone. The gravity field manipulators had done their work. The battle was far from over, but Earth had already proven its supremacy. Solace stood, his gaze focused on the laser plasma display, watching the final remnants of the Xanath Vrok disappear into the black hole. "They've been warned," he said quietly, "but the war is far from over. We need to be prepared for what comes next." Vorin didn't respond. He didn't need to. He understood. Earth had shown its power, and the Galactic Council had seen it firsthand. Now there was no going back. The game had changed. Earth was no longer the underdog. It was the dominant force in the galaxy. "Phase 3, Solace said again, his voice sharper this time. "We continue the assault. The Galactic Council would face the consequences. Earth's rise could not be stopped." "Phase 3. Ryan Solace's voice was colder now, stripped of the urgency that had once defined his every decision. He moved his hands over the console with deliberate precision, the final sequence beginning to unfold across the heads-up displays in front of him. No triumph, no elation, only the quiet ticking of the final moments of the war. The last Council fleet was already on its way to the heart of the galaxy, but Earth had already calculated the final blow. "Are we certain this will finish it?" Jalek Vorin asked, his voice edged with the sharpness of battle-hardened skepticism. The gravity field manipulators had already delivered irreversible damage, but he knew well that nothing was truly won until it was all over. The last fleet was all that remained, Earth's final message to the Galactic Council. "There's no room for doubt," Solace replied flatly. His focus never wavered from the screens. He could hear Vorin shift beside him, the man's instincts always alert to any possible change. But Solace already knew the answer. The Council's leadership was finished. Earth had written the rules of engagement, and they had no countermeasure. The gravity field manipulators had torn through the remaining fleets with ease, and soon their final strength would be consumed. Aboard the Galactic Council's flagship, the Varrock remnants, the last of their military leadership, was scrambling. Their fleets had been swallowed by gravity itself, reduced to fragments in a blink of an eye. Vorin Kresik, now isolated in the command room, stared at the empty void that had once been the thriving heart of their fleet. The Xanath Varrock were gone. The Ulshari defenders were gone. The Council's greatest asset was now scattered in cosmic dust. His hands shook as he transmitted his desperate message to Terrell on the last remaining fleet. "Commander Terrell, what's our status?" He couldn't hide the fear that lingered in his voice, though he masked it with professionalism. "Report back to the Council immediately." Terrell, the commander of the Xanath Varrock's remaining forces, stood at the helm, watching the remnants of his fleet disintegrate. The lights of his ship flickered ominously, signaling its imminent collapse. He grabbed the controls, trying to regain command, but the gravity field manipulators had already rendered his ships helpless. One by one, the ships crumpled under the immense gravitational force pulling them apart, their hulls warping like paper in a flame. Nothing worked. His voice cracked as he turned to his officers. His fleet was a husk, floating helplessly in space, caught within the pull of a black hole they couldn't escape. Their once proud weapons were reduced to mere sparks. He could feel the weight of their impending doom pressing on him. The Galactic Council's military force had been shattered, and now their very existence was crumbling in the vacuum of space. "Get me Kresic again," Terrell demanded, but no one responded. The communication system was down, the last desperate attempts to reach the Council falling on deaf ears. Back on Earth, Solace and Varn stood in quiet observation. Their fleet had already moved, hidden from view but ever present. Their work was done, but the finality of it lingered in the air. Solace could feel it, the weight of what they had accomplished, but there was no relief, no joy, only the hollow echo of a victory that came with its own cost. "It's done," Varn said, his voice low but filled with a mix of satisfaction and something else. "We've broken them." Solace didn't answer immediately. The Galactic Council had been defeated, but the price had been paid. His wife's absence, the sacrifices of so many. He hadn't expected to feel anything in this moment, but there was a cold, quiet emptiness within him. Victory didn't taste the way he thought it would. "This isn't about breaking them," Solace said, his voice unwavering. "It's about rewriting the future." He turned to the console again. The final strike was already in motion. The gravity field manipulators were deployed. The last of the Galactic Council's fleets would soon be consumed by the black holes created by Earth's machine. Solace's mind was already calculating the fallout. The Council would never recover. Their once invincible fleet, their hubris had been erased in an instant. As the last remnants of the Council's fleet were pulled into the black hole, their forms stretched and distorted. The Varrock remnants became nothing more than a part of the cosmic dust. There was no explosion, no dramatic flare of light, only the deep, unrelenting pull of gravity swallowing all in its path. The black holes created by Earth's gravity field manipulators left nothing behind. Varn leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the screen. There was no satisfaction in his eyes. "It's over," he said, though his voice was distant. "They're finished." Solace didn't answer. He didn't need to. The war was done, and Earth had emerged victorious. But the cost of that victory had been written in the wreckage of the Galactic Council's fleets and the broken bodies of its leaders. It had been a strategy forged in the deepest shadows, and now those shadows had come to claim their reward. As Varn glanced back at Solace, he saw the man was lost in thought, his face as unreadable as ever. "What now?" Varn asked, not expecting an answer, but needing to hear it spoken aloud. "Now we rebuild," Solace replied, his eyes scanning the data before him. The future of Earth was written in the silence of a galaxy that no longer held any dominion over them. The Galactic Council had been destroyed, its power shattered, and Earth had claimed its place at the table. But there would be no celebration. Solace had made peace with the cost of the victory, but the path forward was one he had not yet fully embraced. The Galactic Council had fallen. The last of their fleet was gone, swallowed by the gravity field manipulators' black holes, leaving only the echoes of their once unrivaled military might. Earth had won, but there was no joy, only the deep understanding that the battle had been won at an unimaginable price. The galaxy had been reshaped, and Earth now stood as its unchallenged ruler. "What are you thinking?" Varn asked again, breaking the quiet. "I'm thinking about what comes next." Solace looked over at him, his expression hardening. "We've changed the galaxy, but the work isn't over. We've set the course, but the future will depend on what we do with it." "It's done." Ryan Solace's voice cut through the heavy stillness in the war room. The final steps of the victory had been executed. Earth was now the undisputed power in the galaxy. But Solace didn't feel the rush of triumph he had expected. He turned to face the heads-up display, watching the last remnants of the Galactic Council collapse into cosmic dust. He had waited for this moment for years, but now that it was here, the weight of it all was heavier than he could have anticipated. "We've won," Varn said, his words tinged with disbelief. No more counsel, no more threats. It's over. His voice was sharp, cutting through the tension that hung in the room like a thick fog. Vurin had never been one to shy away from the noise of battle. But this was different. The victory felt like a hollow echo, the cost too great to fully absorb in the moment. Solus didn't answer right away. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, but his mind was far away. The faces of the men they had lost, the sacrifices that had been made to get here, weighed on him. His wife's absence was a constant shadow over his thoughts, a reminder of what had been given up in the name of this war. But that was not something to linger on now. Earth's place had been secured, and he had accomplished what he set out to do. We've broken them, Vurin continued, moving to stand beside him, looking at the screens. They thought they could control everything, and now they're gone. There was a certain satisfaction in his voice, but also a trace of uncertainty. He had expected this victory to feel like an explosion, like a release, but instead, it felt like the closing of a door that would never reopen. Solus turned to face him finally, his eyes cold, calculating. We've done more than break them. We've rewritten the future. The Galactic Council will never rise again. Not from this. He paused, his voice growing quieter. But what now? What comes next? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered. Earth had taken its place at the helm of the galaxy, but Solus knew better than anyone that power could be as fragile as it was forceful. The galaxy was vast, and the Council's collapse left a vacuum. It was a space that Earth now occupied, but there was still no guarantee of what would happen in the wake of such devastation. What do we tell them? Vurin asked, his voice steady but tinged with something else, something deep. He wasn't just talking about the Galactic Council, but the people they had led to victory, the ones who fought with us. What do we tell the galaxy? Solus was quiet for a moment. His thoughts were scattered, fragments of conversations, memories, and the faces of those who had come before him, the men and women who had given everything for this moment. Tell them the truth, he said, his voice soft but resolute, that we did what had to be done. For Earth, for the future. He didn't look at Vurin as he spoke, his eyes still locked on the screen. The silence in the war room was heavy, suffocating almost. There was no celebratory cheer, no praise to be exchanged, just the cold, unforgiving reality of what they had achieved. Vurin understood that. He wasn't asking for applause. He had seen enough battles, enough pain, to know that victory was always tempered by loss. But this was something else. This was the shattering of an entire order, and the birth of something new. And yet, Solus still felt the heaviness of the sacrifice in every bone of his body. The council is finished, Vurin said, his voice steady, but there was a shift in him. Something was different now, and Earth is the new power. No one will dare challenge us now. His words were final. But Solus wasn't so sure. We've broken them, but the galaxy is still full of challenges. You're right. Solus finally met his eyes. The work is just beginning. There will be no peace without consequence. There will be those who fight back. As the final remnants of the Galactic Council's fleet were erased from existence, Earth took its place at the center of a galaxy that had never known such power. But in that moment, Solus realized something. Victory had come at a price too high for any real celebration. The weight of the destruction was undeniable. The once mighty fleets of the Council, the ruling power of the galaxy, were now gone. The decision to erase them from the stars had been strategic, necessary, even, but the cost was far from abstract. Millions had perished. Solus thought of the families, the soldiers, the lives lost in the war they had started. Was it all worth it? His thoughts were interrupted as Vurin stepped closer, his eyes scanning the data streams with purpose. The Council's diplomats are scrambling for a resolution. What do we tell them? Tell them what they need to hear, Solus said, his voice growing harder. That Earth will dictate the terms now. No negotiations, no second chances. Vurin nodded, moving toward the comm. He hesitated before sending the message, his mind clearly racing with the implications of what they were about to do. They'll never recover from this. They'll have to submit, or we'll finish what we started. Solus's tone was fine. The room filled with the quiet hum of the ship's systems, as the last of the Galactic Council's forces flickered out of existence. There would be no last-minute counterattack, no desperate plea for mercy. Earth had established its dominance, and now, the rest of the galaxy would have to adjust, whether they liked it or not. What happens now? Vurin asked, his voice heavy with the finality of their victory. But even in his words, There was no joy, no satisfaction, just a stark, hard truth. They had won, but at what cost? Now we rebuild, Solus answered, his voice quiet but filled with authority, and we make sure no one forgets how we got here. As Earth's position solidified in the galaxy, a new chapter was unfolding, but in that chapter there would be no celebration, only the weight of the future, of the power they held, and the consequences of what they had done. The war was over, but its echoes would linger for a long time. Varin paused before responding, his hands resting on the console. He turned to Solus, his expression unreadable. For what it's worth, we've done what we had to. Solus simply nodded, his eyes distant. We've done more than that. We've secured our future. Deploy the terms. Ryan Solus's voice cut through the stillness of the control room, the command crisp and final. His fingers moved across the heads-up display with cold precision, outlining Earth's position as the new force in the galaxy. The Galactic Council was no more, its remnants scattered, its influence erased. In the wake of Earth's victory only one thing remained, establishing their dominance. Jolek Varin stood behind him, watching the data flow across the screen. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, focused on the unfolding scene. They don't realize it yet, but this galaxy belongs to us now. His words were heavy with the quiet satisfaction of a soldier who had outlasted his enemies. He was no longer in exile. Earth had made its mark. Solus didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the laser plasma displays, tracking the shifting dynamics of the galaxy. The last traces of the Galactic Council's fleets had been erased. The Zanath Varrock, the Olsheri defenders, and the others had been swept aside. Now the negotiation process began, no longer as a victim of the Council, but as its master. We've broken them, Varin continued, stepping closer, his voice low but filled with a dark energy. Now we rebuild. We take control. No more shadows. Solus didn't flinch. Control is never permanent, Varin. We keep it by holding the power, and keeping them in line. His words were deliberate, sharp. They had won, but the next challenge was already before them. The galaxy was vast, and Earth's power would have to be asserted with calculated diplomacy. This was no time for celebration. This was a time for consolidation. In the conference chambers of Earth's new capital, representatives from the galaxy's remaining factions had gathered. The air was thick with tension, as diplomats once part of the Galactic Council now stood before Solus and Varin. The newly formed Earth government held all the cards, but the negotiations were far from straightforward. We have no choice but to acknowledge Earth's dominance, a representative from the Orientai Collective said, his voice strained. The Orientai, once a powerful ally to the Galactic Council, now found themselves at the mercy of Earth's power. The weight of their defeat hung heavy in the room. You're right, Varin responded, his tone blunt. You have no choice. Solus raised a hand, halting the growing tension. We're not here to humiliate you. We're here to negotiate terms for the future. He studied the faces before him. Each one of them represented the remnants of a power structure that had once ruled the stars. Now, those same structures were crumbling, their leaders struggling to find footing in this new order. You think they'll accept our terms? Varin asked, once they were alone again. The power of Earth was undeniable, but the Galactic Council's former allies weren't yet fully in line. Solus turned, locking eyes with him. They will, because they have no other option. His words were as cold as the galaxy itself. Our power is undeniable. The game has changed, and we're in control. The rest will follow. Back on the exiled dawn, the gravity of the situation settled in for both men. Their victory had come at a tremendous cost, but it had solidified Earth's position in the galaxy. The Galactic Council, the once invincible force that had ruled for centuries, was no more. Now it was Earth that dictated the future. What comes next? Varin asked, his voice quiet as he leaned against the console. We've done it, but we're still not finished. Solus met his gaze, his eyes betraying a hint of exhaustion. We prepare for the long term. The victory doesn't end with the last fleet. He paused, watching the stars on the display. The galaxy now laid bare before them. Now we rebuild. We make sure no one forgets who controls this galaxy. The Galactic Council was no more. Earth had risen from the fringes of galactic politics to become the undeniable force that now governed. But the victory was hollow. The casualties were countless. The sacrifices. Solus had secured Earth's place, but the war had left its mark. The faces of those lost haunted him, and even now, as he stood at the helm of a new era, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been irrevocably changed. "We're rebuilding a galaxy," Solus said, his voice quieter now, "but we're doing it in the shadow of what we've lost." Varin looked at him, his expression softening for the first time. "You can't change what's been done, Rain, but you can control what happens next." Solus nodded. "That's why we're here, to control." As the negotiations continued, the galaxy's new structure began to take shape. Earth's terms were clear, and the factions that remained in the wake of the Council's fall had no choice but to comply. Solus and Varin now stood at the forefront of this new era. They had secured Earth's future, but at the cost of all they had known. The future was in their hands now, but there would be no celebrations, no victory parades. The work was only beginning, and the quiet reality of their power hung over them like an unspoken truth. "No more shadows," Varin repeated. His words were final, but there was a weight to them that suggested the journey ahead would be long, and the consequences of their victory would resonate through the galaxy for years to come. Solus stood before the laser plasma displays, his gaze unwavering. Let them come. The future of the galaxy had been decided, and Earth would shape it, but with that power came a price. "We've taken our place," he whispered. "Now we make sure no one forgets." "It's over, Varin's voice was low, but the words lingered in the air like smoke from a long-extinguished fire. He leaned against the console, the laser plasma displays casting shadows across his face. The last of the Galactic Council's fleets had been reduced to nothing more than fragmented debris. The galaxy was still. The chaos, once so pervasive, had been swallowed by the cold certainty of Earth's supremacy. Solus didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on the view screen, now filled with the aftermath of the last strike. The once vibrant galaxy had been laid bare, its once mighty factions reduced to ruins. The Council, their leaders, their fleets, everything they had built was gone. Earth had risen, unchallenged and unyielding. "The future," Solus muttered, "is ours." But there was no triumph in his voice, no joy, just the undeniable weight of what they had done, and the cold knowledge that there was no turning back. The victory was complete, but it was not sweet. It was not a victory that could be celebrated. Earth had shattered the galaxy, broken its chains, and claimed its place at the top. But at what cost? It should feel different, shouldn't it? Varin asked, his words tinged with disbelief. There was a pause, as if the words hung there, waiting for the right response. "We've achieved everything we set out to do, yet it feels hollow." Solus didn't answer right away. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, but his mind was far away. The faces of the men they had lost, the sacrifices that had been made to get here, weighed on him. His wife's absence was a constant shadow over his thoughts, a reminder of what had been given up in the name of this war. But that was not something to linger on now. Earth's place had been secured, and he had accomplished what he set out to do. "We've broken them," Varin continued, stepping closer, his voice low but filled with a dark energy. "Now we rebuild, we take control, no more shadows." Solus didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained steady, calculating. "Control is never permanent, Varin. We keep it by holding the power, and keeping them in line." His voice was cold, almost detached. The galaxy was vast, and Earth's power would have to be asserted with calculated diplomacy. This was no time for celebration. This was a time for consolidation. In the conference chambers of Earth's new capital, representatives from the galaxy's remaining factions had gathered. The air was thick with tension as diplomats, once part of the Galactic Council, now stood before Solus and Varin. The newly formed Earth government held all the cards, but the negotiations were far from straightforward. "We have no choice but to acknowledge Earth's dominance," a representative from the Orontai collective said, his voice strained. The Orontai, once a powerful ally to the Council, now found themselves at the mercy of Earth's power. The weight of their defeat hung heavy in the room. "You're right," Varin responded, his tone blunt. "You have no choice." Solus raised a hand, halting the growing tension. "We're not here to humiliate you. We're here to negotiate terms for the future." He studied the faces before him. Each one of them represented the remnants of a power structure that had once ruled the stars. Now those same structures were crumbling, their leaders struggling to find footing in this new order. "You think they'll accept our terms?" Varin asked, once they were alone again. The power of Earth was undeniable, but the Galactic Council's former allies weren't yet fully in line. Solus turned, locking eyes with him. "They will, because they have no other option." His words were cold, calculated. They had won, but the next challenge was already before them. The galaxy was vast, and the Council's collapse left a vacuum. It was a space that Earth now occupied, but there was still no guarantee of what would happen in the wake of such devastation. Back on the exiled Dawn, the gravity of the situation settled in for both men. Their victory had come at a tremendous cost, but it had solidified Earth's position in the galaxy. The Galactic Council, the once invincible force that had ruled for centuries, was no more. Now it was Earth that dictated the future. "This is our galaxy now, Ron," Vorian said, his tone more contemplative than usual. "We're in control." There was a sense of finality in his words, but it wasn't the kind of finality that spoke of victory. It was the finality of something irreversible, something that couldn't be undone. "We're in control," Solus repeated, his voice low, "but control comes with its own price." There was a long pause between them. Neither of them spoke for a moment, as if each man was lost in the weight of what they had done. Earth was victorious. Yes, the galaxy was there, but the path to this moment had been paved in blood, sacrifice, and unrelenting calculation. It had cost them everything, and now the cost was apparent. The burden of power was theirs to bear. "Do you regret it?" Vorian asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence. "No," Solus replied, his gaze distant. "I don't regret it." But there was something in his voice, something that spoke to the price of victory. "But I will carry the weight of it for the rest of my life." The galactic negotiations had begun, but they were different now. The terms were already set, unyielding. Earth was now the center of everything. Solus sat in the grand chamber, his hands clasped in front of him, as representatives from the remaining factions, those that had survived the storm, filed in one by one. They were no longer diplomats seeking favor. They were now supplicants, looking for their place under Earth's rule. The once proud leaders of the Galactic Council were now ghosts, their power extinguished. Solus and Vorian were the architects of this new galaxy. There was no room for weakness, no time for regrets. As each representative entered, they bowed their heads, their eyes fixed on the ground. Some were defiant, others resigned, but none of them had the strength to oppose the weight that Earth now commanded. The Galactic Council's representatives, if they still dared to call themselves such, now understood that their empire, their legacy, was gone. "We have come to terms," one of the Orontai diplomats said, his voice strained. He had been a key ally to the Council, but now his race was but a footnote in the history of the galaxy. "We are willing to submit to Earth's authority, for the sake of peace." "Peace," Solus echoed, his voice cold. "Peace is what happens when there is no choice left, when the galaxy has no one to turn to but us. You will learn that Earth's peace is not negotiable. You will follow our rules, or you will be erased, just like the rest." Vorian stood beside him, his posture rigid, every inch the soldier who had fought for this moment. He nodded slightly, confirming the severity of their intentions. "There's no room for weakness. Only those who adapt will survive. The rest will be swept aside." Just as the Galactic Council was, the diplomats remained silent. They knew there was no alternative. Earth had already proven it, could destroy entire fleets with ease. The hypernova projectiles, the gravity field manipulators, and now the quantum signal disruptor. Earth's weapons were unmatched. What hope did they have against such power? After the negotiations, Solus and Vorian stood in the quiet of the command room, staring at the stars outside the window. The galaxy was quiet now, at least in the way it had once been. There was no more council to rule, no more rebellions to fear. Earth had made its mark, and now it stood as the unquestioned authority. But there was no relief. "This is our galaxy now, Ron," Vorian said, his voice distant. "We've achieved everything." Solus met his gaze, the weight of their actions resting heavily on his shoulder. "Everything," he replied, voice calm but laden with the truth of it all. "But it will never be enough." "Not really." Vorian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't speak. The truth was evident. Earth's victory was final, and its power was absolute. "But at what cost?" "We've done more than take control," Solus said. "We've defined the future, but that future..." His voice trailed off as he gazed out into the stars. The echoes of their actions would ripple across the galaxy for generations. The galaxy had been reshaped. Earth now stood at the center, its place as the dominant force, undeniable. But Solus could feel the weight of it, the knowledge that power was fragile, that victory was fleeting. They had rewritten the galaxy's story, but the next chapter was theirs to write. "We've done it," Vorian said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "Now, we ensure that they remember who holds the power." Solus stood, his gaze fixed on the vast galaxy before them. "They'll remember," he said quietly, and they'll never forget.